Hey everyone, this is Winston, and thank you for joining me for this webinar series. I plan to do it as a monthly series where I want to share some pretty practical, actionable, step-by-step content, educational content that you can use either to help with your own marketing execution, just based on my experience, some of the things I've worked on, or some of the things I am currently working on, and some of the results that we're actually seeing with that. So for this first webinar, I want to talk about how to use webinars, coincidentally, using webinars for buyer research to develop our go-to-market content strategy. And this is basically a project that we worked on in terms of a new product launch that the company wanted. And I'm just going to walk you through exactly what it is that we did to deliver on certain marketing objectives that we had. All right, so a bit of backstory behind all of this. So as I mentioned, the company wanted to launch a new product because they have 4 audiences, 4 target buyers, 4 personas, depending on the term you want to use, that they actually have separate product offerings for. So one of those personas, they actually decided that they wanted to put a lot more focus on that persona because they believe that it wasn't getting as much attention as the other 3. So they thought, well, let's come up with some sort of product offering to actually offer to this specific persona group. Now, the thing about it is that, and what I recommended to them is, rather than just us going out there and launching a product and saying, hey, we have this new product, buy from us now, let's take the time to actually deliver some value to these people, right? Because a lot of them haven't heard from you in a while. Most of them probably don't even really know what the company is about. So let's create some value. Let's actually create some sort of demand and desire behind the product before we actually introduce the product to them. So just to help you to understand the flow of this webinar. So I've divided it up into 2 parts. The first part, I'm going to walk through the process that was used for gathering the data for us to develop our go-to-market content strategy. And then the second half, I'm going to walk through how we actually use that data, those insights, to actually build and execute our strategy. All right, so part 1, the process used for gathering the data. Now, the first thing that we did is we wanted to create our ideal customer profile. Now, your ideal customer profile is basically who would be the best fit customers for this particular product that you want to introduce, or it could be a product that you already have, right? And there are really 2 different criteria to this when you're developing your ideal customer profile. The first of which is what we call a qualification criteria. And that simply means, what are the things or the characteristics, the traits that will help us to define this particular customer group or persona that we want to go after. The second part of that is actually what we call a disqualification criteria, right? Because we wanted the campaign to be very targeted. So we also looked on, well, who are the people who they may have some benefit or they may gain some benefit from this particular product, but those aren't the people we necessarily want to target for this particular product launch. And the reason for that is we wanted the position in the messaging, how we communicated the value of this specific product, to speak to a particular group. So we had those who we wanted and those who we didn't want for this particular product launch. The next thing that we did is we sought a subject matter expert advice because one of the things we said, well, we want to deliver value. How can we do that? All right, let's create content, probably in the form of webinars, to actually deliver to this particular persona group. And so we reached out to a subject matter expert that had a lot of history, a lot of knowledge, experience, expertise with this particular persona group. And, we asked that person, well, what are some of the challenges that you've recognized over the past couple of years of, actually interacting with this particular persona group that you believe we can build our webinar topic around to actually deliver value to this particular group? So we asked her for 3 and she gave us the top 3 that she have realized in terms of those challenges, right? The next thing that we did is we surveyed 10 existing customers that fit within that particular ideal customer profile that I mentioned here. And it's basically asking them, hey, we want to put on this webinar. We want to focus on these three specific topics. What do you believe, or what do you want us to actually present on that you believe would be the most value to you, right? What specific topic would you want to learn the most about out of the three that we mentioned? So once we did that, we selected the one that was the most common response, or the top choice. And then right after that, we started creating our webinar assets. So that includes the flyer that we were going to use for our promotion, the copy on that particular flyer, as well as any copy that we would use in communication, whether that be a social media ad or on the landing page that we wanted to create, and the link to that specific landing page that people could go on and actually sign up to be a part of this webinar as an attendee. Once we did that, then we ran targeted ads for webinar registration, as I mentioned, to get people signing up, kind of gauge, is this a particular topic that people would be interested in? Now, originally, our target was 50 registrants, right? Because we said we wanted it to be very intimate. We didn't want a huge crowd because we wanted to create a really personalized experience for this particular, for the participants who actually attended the webinar. We wanted a very personalized experience. So our target was actually 50, but we were so overwhelmed because the reality is that we got it was just about 300 registrants for this particular webinar. So it was way oversubscribed than we had anticipated. And that was sort of a big issue. I mean, it's a good problem to have if you really think about it. But the reason it was an issue for us, as I mentioned, we didn't want such a huge number. We want to create a personalized experience. So then we thought, well, we only want 50, but we have 300 people who are registered for this particular webinar. What are we going to do? So the solution that we actually came up with is, why not create a survey within the webinar registration itself? And we email out the survey with the form to say to people, well, we apologize, we're oversubscribed. We originally anticipated or prepared for 50 people, but we have 300. So what we have to do is the first 50 people who actually fill out this particular form will be eligible to attend the webinar. So we did that. We got the 50 people to actually register, but we also told the other 250 who wouldn't have been able to attend that we would provide a webinar recording and email it out to them so that they could watch it afterwards. So this is just some of the information that we actually collected on that particular webinar, or should I say that particular survey form that we use to gather customer feedback. Typical things such as first name, last name, email address, telephone number, position. And it's really the last two questions that I really want you to pay attention to, which is, describe your biggest struggle with your role and what do you believe can be done to improve it. Because what we wanted to get a sense from attendees or the participants themselves in terms of what it is they struggle with exactly. But more importantly, how do they see the solution to their particular challenge, right? Because it's one thing if we say, well, these are the challenges and this is what we believe the solution should be. Because oftentimes when we're doing or having any sort of product launch or any sort of new product development, we always assume that the solution that we think is a solution that the customer perceives as the best solution. So that's one of the reasons why we included that particular question. The next step was to actually sort and organize all the data once we got all people, filling out the survey. The next thing I did was to put together an Excel sheet to collect all the data and have it in one place. So first name, last name, position, struggle response. Struggle response would be based on question 5, which describe your biggest struggle. And then we have recommended solution, which will be based on question 6. What do you believe can be done to improve, right? Now, this particular column, you'll see that it says struggle theme, right? And the whole idea, I actually got this idea from reading Forget the Funnel by Gia and Georgia, I believe their names are, who wrote the book and came up with this whole concept of a struggle theme. So basically what it is you take all the responses from whatever customer research that you're doing in terms of all the struggles, and you assign particular themes to it. So it's really a way to categorize all the different struggle responses or all the challenges that you're your research would have, those insights that it would have delivered. So for example, someone may say, well, one of the struggles I have is we don't have a centralized platform to collect all our data where everyone can see it, which is causing us to be very inefficient in how we execute certain projects and causing us to actually miss certain deadlines. Now, that's just one response from one person, but it's actually 3 different struggle theme or struggle categories that we could pull from that. Right, the first one could be that they don't have a way to collect centralized data so everyone could see. That's one struggle theme or one struggle category. The next one could be that they're very inefficient in executing projects. And a third struggle theme could be that they're missing project deadlines. So just from that one person, you have 3 struggle themes. So that's basically what I did, going through all the information, creating struggle themes or struggle categories. And one of the things it allowed me to do was to really have a high level view rather than me having to go through all the responses here. And I think I should have mentioned that, as you can see, it's blocked out, obviously for confidentiality reasons, not to have people's information or data online, which is one of the reasons why you see it blocked out here. But anyway, going back to what I was saying, it allows me to have a high level view of what the different categories are, so I can quickly analyze the data and make certain actionable decisions as to what we're going to do moving forward. So once we did all of that, we put everything together in a chart where we list out, from this particular table, we came up with 10 different struggle themes or struggle categories. And what we did was we decided to focus on the top 3, right? So rather than having to try and address all the challenges that this particular persona group wanted to address, we focused on the top 3 responses and decided that we're going to build our entire go-to-market content strategy around these particular 3. All right, so now we get to part 2, using the data to build and execute our strategy. So really what we wanted to do was we wanted to focus around 4 different areas in terms of our go-to-market strategy. The first was positioning and messaging. The second was, content or content assets that we wanted to create and develop for the particular strategy and campaign. The third was ad campaigns in terms of how would we execute to actually generate particular leads or webinar attendees or registrants, whatever it is that the marketing objective was for this particular go-to-market strategy. And then, of course, you have the go-to-market strategy, which is really how do we introduce this product to the people who we want to try and, actually buy from us. Let me just briefly go through each one. I know I did just now, but let me briefly go through each one. So the position and the messaging is how our target customers or your target customers perceive the value that you deliver. How are you different? How are you unique from your competitors that offers the same service? And how do you actually communicate that uniqueness, right? So how do we position what we have to offer in such a way where people can see the value in it, but also can see how it's different than what's already in the market. So they come to us for this particular product rather than going to our competitors. The content would just be, as I mentioned, the content assets that would be created that are relevant to our target audience. And how do we map that content across the entire buyer's journey? And the buyer's journey is how do we move them from being completely unaware of the brand and this particular product that we wanted to launch to actually getting them to become customers and purchase the product itself. And what content do we need to deliver at the right time, at the right place to this specific persona group? The ad campaigns is just like the ad creatives, the copy that we created that would resonate with our target customers. And resonates in the sense of, as I mentioned, we want to target a specific persona group. And we were very intentional about that. So one of the things that we did is certain insights that we got in terms of the survey that we asked them for, those responses for the buyer research. We took that very same wording in terms of how they describe their struggles, how they describe the solution, and we use that to pretty much craft our ad campaigns, the copy for our ad campaigns, the creatives in terms of what specific image can we use to represent this particular persona group. And as it mentions here, what's the value that they will get from this particular product, and how do these campaigns factor into the overall marketing and sales process. Now, the difference between the content assets versus the ad campaigns. The content assets is what's the value that we could deliver in informational format that we could consistently deliver over a period of time. So there was no set time frame within when we would actually deliver this value. So this is where I mentioned where we wanted to deliver value to this particular persona group first before we actually try to sell to them. The ad campaigns, the purpose of the ad campaigns would actually be whether that's whatever marketing objectives we have for a specific time frame, whether that was lead generation, whether that was to get as many webinar registrants for the webinars as possible. And then finally, the go-to-market strategy. As I mentioned, how do we launch and introduce this new product offering to our target audience, our target customers to drive leads, sign-ups, and revenues? And finally, who are the people that needs to be involved in this entire execution process to make it successful? So this is just a breakdown of the entire process flow, or the buyer process flow, of how we actually executed this go-to-market strategy. So in the first instance, the first webinar, we really didn't want to sell in the first webinar. The purpose of the first webinar was twofold. One, we wanted to deliver value to our persona group, our target persona group, without actually, trying to sell to them, so that they feel that we truly want to deliver value to them. But the other reason was we wanted to test to see if, based on the topic that we decided on, is this something that people would really be interested in, and how could we now follow up with that and expand on that particular content asset from that first webinar. This process flow actually breaks down the second webinar that we did. Once we collected all the insights, once we had the struggle theme and the struggle responses, and how we knew what our positioning would be, the messaging, with the ad campaigns, with the creatives, the content assets. And this is the go-to-market strategy in terms of how we executed all of that. So we ran social media ads promoting the webinar using our flyer creative, and that would lead people to the webinar event sign-up page where they could fill out their information to attend the second webinar. And then we hosted the webinar with our subject matter expert, who I mentioned that we went to this person to figure out, what are the top 3 challenges or topics that person believed the persona group who we wanted to reach out to, our target, would be interested in. And we also partnered with an organization that is very familiar within this particular persona group, because we wanted to use or leverage their credibility and authority that they had with this particular group to say, hey, we've partnered with this particular organization that you're very familiar with, that you trust, that has your best interest at heart, which means that what we're offering to you is actually credible. It's actually of value to you, and so you can trust us because you trust the partner organization, right? So it's very strategic in that way in terms of our go-to-market strategy. Now, from this, so we had the webinar, we delivered the information, the value that we would offer. And then at the end of the webinar, we introduced the product to say, hey, we have this new product offering, this new product that's coming out. We've partnered with this organization that you're very familiar with. And we want to know, based on, what you've heard, whatever brief information we gave at the end of that webinar, who are the people who are interested to find out more about this particular product and, would be, at the very least, curious to know what it entails, in the hopes of actually generating those leads and converting those leads to actual sales for the new product that we were launching. So it was divided into 2 different sets of people. We have the hand raisers and the non-hand raisers. The hand raisers would be people who actually communicated some level of interest to say, hey, we're interested. And for those people, we send them the link to a landing page, which would have all the details of the product, how the partnership came about, why we decided to do the partnership, specific features of the particular product, how it benefits this particular persona group, and basically anything and everything that they would need to know about the particular product. And for those people who actually filled out the form, we passed to sales to follow up. Now, and sales use telephone calls to actually follow up with these people. Now, it's very important to understand that even though the product is directed towards the persona group, and even though we were marketing to the persona group is not necessarily decision makers. The persona group is more the influencers who could get the decision makers to decide or influence whether or not, or convince them, persuade them, whatever term you want to use, to actually purchase this product on their behalf because they see the value in it. And so basically it was a way to take people who were necessarily qualified leads and turn them into our own internal champions, where our influencers or our champions could speak on our behalf to the decision makers. So once our salespeople made that phone call to them to follow up with them after they've showed interest, they find out certain information like who's the decision maker, what's your buying process like for a product like this, who needs to be involved, who are the buying committees, the members of the buying committee who needs to be involved in this process to make it happen and make it go through. And the salespeople get all the information, get the information of who the decision maker was to actually follow up, to set a meeting where they would pitch the product, they would communicate the value, and of course we would have our internal champion who would help us to kind of get through the door and help to lower whatever barriers to entry that may have been there to help us or help the sales team make that sale. Well, that is this process in terms of what sales did. Now, from a marketing standpoint, we continue to send email nurtures on the offer. So giving them certain information that we probably couldn't communicate on the landing page because it was too much information. So we sent it we sent an email nurturing over the course of, I think it was 6 weeks or 4 weeks. So just kind of update them and give them more information on what the product and the value and the benefit that they would get from it. And finally, we created a separate newsletter, if you will, with a repurposed webinar content to deliver to those people to actually deliver value to them as well. And as you can see, the arrow points here, which I'm going to break down. The non-hand raisers would be the people who are not interested in the product whatsoever. They didn't show interest. I wouldn't say they're not interested, but they didn't show interest at that particular point in time. Doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't interested at all. It probably just means that at that particular time they weren't interested, but it doesn't mean that they won't be interested after. But the thing about it is that we wanted to ensure that we keep the brand top of mind so that when they are interested, then they would come to us to buy instead of the competitors. So one of the things that we did is we repurposed the webinar content, the same repurposed webinar content that we have for the hand raisers and for the non-hand raisers. And as I mentioned, we created a bi-monthly newsletter that we would send out to them, the repurposed webinar content. We repurposed the content and created, I think it was probably 2 or 3 blog posts that we could share, because not everyone necessarily consumes content in video. So we want to create as many formats as possible for those who consume it, whether in the written form or the video form. And then we created social media posts based on the webinar, the information on the webinar, just tidbits that we could use to increase engagement and deliver value to this particular person or group online. And so for that second webinar that we hosted, this time we had 100 attendees. We generated 20 qualified leads, which would be the people who are the hand raisers who showed some level of interest. So from attendees to actual qualified leads generated, that was a 20% conversion for that particular webinar. They were very happy with that, and we were happy that we were able to deliver that for them. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. I hope this webinar was valuable. I hope the information was valuable. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Winston A. Henderson. You can just type it in, search for me on LinkedIn. And if you want to know more about what we do in terms of ICAD marketing, then you can visit icadmarketing.com. And we have all the information there in terms of how we can help you, whether that's to build brand authority, whether that's to generate better lead quality, whether that's to create more sales opportunity that can fuel your revenue growth. All the information is there that you can use to reach out to us, book a call, book an intro call, and we'll reach back out to you and we'll make it happen. This is Winston once more. Take care and all the best.